Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. A raft of new details emerging on Ferrari's 2025 car, with a number of solutions they have reportedly found that will take their car to the next level, and simulations suggesting their car is in a particularly good spot. Fundamentally though, we don't know what the competition has delivered. McLaren and Red Bull, maybe even Mercedes, bringing serious components next year. But if the rumours are true, and the sources indicating behind the scenes that Ferrari have solutions on the S25 that no other team has considered, are they the new title favourites if this actually comes to reality? But again, it's February, it's Italian press, it is Ferrari. Very much enjoying your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into today, starting here. These are the reveal dates of the cars. Not quite though. So the 18th of February, that is the date where the teams will turn up in London, all of the teams, to reveal their livery for the first time at the F175 event they are running there. Now, some teams are doing a proper reveal of the car after that. That applies to Ferrari, that applies to Aston, Mercedes and Red Bull. They're at least revealing their car on the track, largely Mercedes, Red Bull doing a shakedown in Bahrain. Of course, Ferrari are doing a kind of private test at their own base in Fiorano to introduce Hamilton driving the new Ferrari for the first time. Williams and Haas and RB, they have some sort of event plans, but they will not be able to show the livery of the new car before the 18th of February. That's the plan. These are the relevant dates where these teams may do something, but we know that a lot of these events are just sponsor stuff and just like, hey, shout out these guys, shout out those guys, and then really the 18th is where it kicks off, and from that point the cars can be shown, and some teams are going to show the real car, such as Ferrari, at Fiorano at the test just a day or so after the confirmation. We talked about Sergio Perez the other day. Reportedly, he is looking to come back. If he is coming back, where do you guys think is most likely for him to land? My theory is probably Cadillac, to be honest. It makes a fair bit of sense. They may or may not get Colton Herta. If they do, or even if they don't, certainly if they don't, Sergio Perez makes a fair bit of sense, just because at the end of the day, he's not an American driver, but a USA driver, but he is a big driver from the Americas, and it's potentially an important aspect for Cadillac to consider when it comes to choosing their driver pairing. An experienced pair of hands, if not maybe necessarily a reliable pair of hands anymore, but still, Red Bull are Red Bull, driving alongside Max is driving alongside Max. I still think Perez can do a solid job in a reasonable car, but if I was making this call, would I choose Perez over Valtteri Bottas? Not in terms of performance, but maybe in terms of impact and audience, and the value of the Perez fan base and the Mexican fan base could be particularly valuable to Cadillac. So something to consider, because definitely Perez seems like he wants to come back, and maybe Cadillac is the most likely option as it stands coming in for 2026. Lando Norris as well said a few interesting things to the media today. I know there's been talk about Lando because I had a look at the bookies and what the bookies said. They have, most of the bookies, I didn't really look at many of them, but basically Lando and Max are considered equal title favourites for the new season. It's Lando, it's Max, then it's like Leclerc, Hamilton, and then it goes down from there, which makes a fair bit of sense, to be honest. But it's difficult to say. Is Max the favourite? Is Lando the favourite? Who knows? And many people are wondering, and they have wondered for years, if Lando won Sochi 2021, as he should have done, how would that have changed his development? Would it have changed much? Of course, it took him until this year to actually win a Grand Prix in Miami. But he said a few things, Lando, talking about Hamilton. He would do the same thing if he was in his position. Looking forward to racing him again on track this year. Always an honour to race against someone like him. But he did say this: I needed to prove to myself, I'll actually read the full quote here, that I was capable of winning races, and I did it last year. I'm not saying that I did it perfectly. I think I had my fair share of errors, but he says I can come into this year confident, which is a rare thing for me to be. I'm in the best shape I've ever been in, physically, mentally, everything. So I think Lando's ready to give it a go. I do think that Lando will need to be, and I think he knows this, I don't want to say nastier, but I kind of want to say nastier, right? Like, when he was battling Max this season, in some instances, let's say Mexico, and obviously in Mexico he got away with it, kind of, at least in terms of Max got the penalties, but Lando was forced off the track and he didn't win the race. So in many respects, that helped Max, in some levels, right? Obviously restricting Lando's points that he scored on that weekend. But even on that weekend, I felt like Lando was of a mindset of, okay, well, if I push this far, then Max may go over the line. And when Max goes over the line, then, I can capitalize because Max is going to get penalized, which he did. But the issue is, let's say you're Lando in that moment, you're trying to get Max to go over the line in the way that you're driving. That's not necessarily a terrible idea, but as it did, it compromised Lando's race, right? Like, the sensible, or maybe not sensible, maybe the slightly scarier, but probably the more effective strategy is to say, look, Max, I'm not going to let you try anything with me. If you try anything with me, I'm going to give it right back to you as well. And, fighting with Max on that level is the way to get Max to respect you, probably. Is that the more winning approach? There's a question, right? But I definitely think that the likes of Hamilton and Leclerc, they don't, they've not been pushed around by Max. And when they have, they've pushed back. And Lando hasn't really. It lives rent-free in my head when he just left the door open a couple of years ago in Austin. And to be fair, he did it again last year as well. So, I think Lando, that would be my feeling if I was him, right? Because my opinion, Lando understood towards the end of last year the way to maybe get Max to push over the limit and get himself a penalty. But did it work? Did it work in Austin? And obviously he got penalised there, even though Lando or Max were off the track. Did it work in Mexico? No. So I think Lando needs to come out fighting next year with a mentality of a slightly different competitor, because I think the only way you're going to really beat Max with the way that he drives is, to be a driver that Max knows that he can't push around. And I think Lando needs to get there. And maybe he can. Enter into your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk Red Bull. This is Max Verstappen. Here he is in the new team kits. I mean, I'm going to spend about 5 more seconds on this because not great in my opinion, but whatever, it is what it is. The Red Bull coming back, not as many sponsors as I might maybe expect to see. But let's talk Ferrari, because lots of discussion on this. The Ferrari colours better than the Red Bull colours as far as I'm concerned. Everyone loves the red car and all that. Hamilton will be in the car relatively soon, but is the car going to be any good? That is the key question. There's a few other interesting questions as well, such as Piero Ferrari reportedly mentioning that Hamilton and Leclerc, it will benefit them being in a rivalry. Now, this is certainly a perspective. Is it the correct perspective? That is a matter for debate. I know what he's saying, right? And I totally get it. You put Hamilton and Leclerc next to each other, they will bring the best out of each other. It should be very competitive between the both of them, theoretically, in that team. Hamilton will try and maximise his qualifying. Leclerc will try and maximise his performance in the race, largely pushed on by each other. And I think that does make some sense. But equally, would Hamilton or Leclerc be equally motivated by a title battle with another top driver in another top team? Yes, absolutely, right? Like, Bottas, did he bring the best out of Hamilton in 2021? Or was it Verstappen in, the Red Bull, right? And Leclerc is no Bottas, and he won't be to Hamilton. But, I don't imagine anyway. But equally, I might argue the benefit could be to the drivers individually in terms of their overall performance, but it won't necessarily be to the drivers individually in terms of their points scored over the season, although that may help Ferrari, or it may hurt Ferrari if they crash into one another, which I don't think they'll do, because these two are very respectful drivers on the track. But we've got to talk about their car, because if it doesn't suit either driver, or if some of the risks they take do not pay off, then there's no chance of a championship challenge. But the car we know will be basically completely different to last year's 2024 car. They say 99% different. The SF24, whatever it was 95% different to the previous situation, the SF23. This car is going to be 99% different to the car before. Now, just notable in this image here, actually, is just this air intake. I just wanted to point it out in this image where you guys can see it behind, is this Leclerc's car? Yeah, behind Leclerc's head. You can see it's a triangular intake. Not every team goes for something like this. That is what they're going to keep. Basically, everything else they are going to change. So this was the article originally from the Italian, but kind of wanted to go through it real quick on what the, De Kessa and the guys over at Formula Uno Auto Racer, as it is now, had to say on this situation. And it's going to be 1% the same car. A lot of that is to do with cooling and the way that the weight distribution works in that sense. But basically, everything else is going to change. So there was some discussion here in the article that other teams have messed around with changing the way that the cooling works and reallocating the internal mechanics. That is a big job, and it's a risky job which carries consequences. There was even discussion further down, we'll get to it in a second, that Red Bull have suffered with that last year. We know that they are changing to the pull rod front suspension to eliminate the strong limitations that the SF24 carried throughout the year, especially regarding how to heat up the tyres. And reportedly, as we're about to say, the simulators say, great, this is an excellent idea, but the redistribution of mass is never trivial and requires time to learn the setup window. And there obviously is going to be some of that going on. But what is discussed is that the FW47, so the Williams, they have decided to redistribute some of the radiating masses when it, radiators, I imagine, right? Some of the cooling, I think, is what they're talking about here. And the SF25, though, they're not going to do this. They're not going to have a heavy redistribution of the central radiators. The Red Bull messed with this last year, and it didn't really pay off for them, right? They had to make corrections because they tried to redistribute the internals so they could have those, channels on the back, the cannons or whatever, the Mercedes W14-esque looking things on the back of the car. Never really worked. So Ferrari has decided not to take that risk. They're going to keep a lot of their internal dynamics, as in the structure of the allocation of the parts, relatively similar. That's pretty much it though. So the air intake of the hood will remain triangular like the roll hoop. They've not changed that in a couple of years. The ears glued to the sides of the airbox are in fact present on the entire fleet of cars until 2024. That's basically all they're not changing. Everything else is going to change on the car. And as I mentioned, according to simulation data, the SF25 shows great potential, largely due to several innovations, including a redesigned front suspension. So Ferrari aren't kidding when they say they're taking some serious risk. Do we take the simulation data with any validity? We don't have any numbers here. We don't have it's 5 tenths faster, it's 8 tenths faster. There was a number that went around a few weeks ago that it was going to be a second faster per lap than last year's model. Who knows? And the crucial thing is, what tracks are we talking about? And also, what have the other teams done? That is the big question that I have with what we are about to discuss here in the coming couple of seconds. Is that, okay, Ferrari may have done X. What if McLaren have done X plus 1? Or what if Red Bull have done X plus 4? Like, you don't really know, and that's why the teams are in the dark. But apparently, some of the guys at Ferrari are confident enough to say some, well, let's just say, emphatic statements. Now, Ferrari are known for doing this type of stuff, but this is an article here from Formula Critica. Again, it's Italian press. Take it as you will. And I'm not sure these are necessarily direct quotes, but these are interpretations of quotes from people, sources in the scenes. So we know that the Project 677, which is this year's car, the SF25, it's all under, immense secrecy, as it always is. We know they're changing the suspension. There's talk about the brakes as well. From what has leaked out, it seems the team is experimenting with an innovative architecture. The new configuration will allow us to better manage tyre wear, keeping the car competitive throughout the race. Now, tyre wear was not a big issue for the SF24 last year. It was mainly getting the tyres up to temperature in qualifying. That was a big problem for them. But there's also talk here on the brakes. As an insider says, brake cooling has made significant progress. Ferrari has developed a system which allows for reduced response times, improving braking performance without compromising the overall balance of the car. And apparently this could be a particularly important detail on some of the more demanding tracks. There's obviously talk about finding solutions on the limit of the aerodynamic regulations. We are at the limit, but we are staying within the boundaries of the regulation. So, I imagine as all teams have, they've come up with some sort of innovations. But this is more than we have heard from other teams. Obviously, McLaren messed around with the flexible wings. I imagine Ferrari are doing something relatively similar. But this was the paragraph that I really wanted to dial into. A particularly interesting detail concerns downforce. The SF25 could have a significantly higher efficiency on the straights compared to the competition without sacrificing downforce in the corners. There is talk of a study on aerodynamic flows that no other team has explored at this level, and a car design that is clearly different from the 2024 single-seater. We have solutions that others have not even considered, declared a technician from the aero department, although no one is willing to provide precise details. Secrecy remains total. So what do we think about this statement here? We have solutions that others have not even considered. So, apparently that's from a technician in the aero department at Ferrari. So, okay, is this another the car is unprecedented in terms of speed? We heard that about the SF23 from a top guy at Ferrari, and it turned out the car was fast in qualifying, but was nowhere near close to being able to compete with the Red Bull over the course of that season and had its fair share of problems. Is this another one of those quotes, or is there something to this? Because, as I just mentioned, the teams don't know what the other teams have done. So for this technician to be so confident that their solution, their plan has not even been considered by other teams, is quite the same, because it's not like he doesn't know. Like, he obviously knows that he doesn't know that other teams are also trying other things. So, you know, for Ferrari to believe that they have some ideas that nobody else is trying, and not like they didn't try them last year, they're not trying them this year because they're not considering them, it's quite the statement. Whether that's just overconfidence or maybe good confidence, who knows? But there was talk about this a while ago, I think I do remember it, discussion on the fact that Ferrari were looking into these airflows, looking at how they can, you know, extract more straight line speeds from where they currently are. And yeah, if the rumours are true that they have done more investigation here, more research here, more development here, more innovation here than any other team has, to such an extent that it goes far beyond what other teams are even considering doing, you know, it's quite the statement. As I say though, this is Ferrari, this is February, the car reveals are coming up, this is prime, I mean, over the last couple of years, you know, hopium, copium, whatever, like, this is when all the information comes out to say the Ferrari this year is going to be unbelievable, this is our year, right? Like, every year seems to happen, and to be fair, last year was very, very close to being their year on a couple of different fronts. But as the article goes on to say, the reality is we just don't really know. Is the car going to suit Hamilton well? Who knows? And, you know, if a similar article was written about McLaren, I imagine they might be saying a similar thing. There's talk at McLaren with extreme innovation they're coming forward with. I'm sure that there's some of their ideas that they believe no other team is doing. What about Red Bull? What about Mercedes? Who knows? But I will say, just reading these articles, as I have done over the last few years now, this is probably, you know, the most interesting that I've actually heard them being discussed. And I'm very excited to see what this car's going to look like, because, you know, 99% different from last year's car, and we're talking some innovative ideas to increase straight line speed without compromising downforce, solutions that nobody else has considered. The brakes are different, the front suspension's different. It's going to be very fascinating to see what this looks like when it gets to the track. How's Max Verstappen going to react? What's the Red Bull going to be like this season? Man, we have a lot of questions to answer in the relatively near future, but very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.